UFC 242 brought a very intriguing clash between Khabib Nurmagomedov, Dustin Poirier, which Khabib won in the third round. Also Edson Barboza lost via split decision to Paul Felder. It was an awesome slugfest, and there was a lot to unpack from this event on the last Saturday. Let's look at the best and the worst moments. Now, the best. The Eagle rules. Khabib, he is the official boogeyman of UFC light heavyweight division. It's not enough that he is the most dominant fighter in the 155 pound, a weight class that is stacked from top to bottom. He constantly mouths his competition. What makes Nurmagomedov such a scary individual to fight is that every opponent he faces knows exactly what he is going to try to do, and not a single person has been able to stop him. And sure, Nurmagomedov has missed a takedown here or there, but ultimately he always seems to find a way to drag his opponents down to the canvas, and from there it's like watching the Nature Channel when a lion captures a gazelle. Nurmagomedov is relentless with his ground attack, and at that point the fighters facing him are just trying to survive to the final bell. And on Saturday, Nurmagomedov had to fight through more adversity than perhaps any time since he became a top-ranked lightweight, and ultimately that was a single punch landed by Dustin Poirier in the guillotine choke attempt that was eventually, I don't want to say stopped, but it didn't affect Khabib much. That punch rocked him, but Khabib recovered swiftly. In both instances, Nurmagomedov came roaring back by winning the second round after Poirier landed his best punch of the fight and then slipping free of the guillotine choke before finishing the interim champ. A few seconds later, like all great champions, Nurmagomedov will be judged by kind of competition that opposed him, and that's where his accomplishments are, let's say, made even more impressive. He laid out a path of destruction going through Eddie Alvarez, Anthony Showtime Pettis, Justin Gaethje, Edson Barboza, Max Holloway, Ali Quinta, and got to the title fight. He still didn't make it past the third round with Nurmagomedov. Obviously challenges still lie ahead for Khabib, most notably a showdown with Tony Ferguson, not to mention a power-punching All-American wrestler named Justin Gaethje, as well as a top prospect, probably Gregor Gillespie, and they might actually have the best weapons to counter the Russians' dominant and annoying grappling game. And despite all those fighters coming up the ranks, it's still going to be awfully hard for anybody to dethrone Khabib as he looks to tie the all-time title defense record in the lightweight division with his next fight. Dustin Poirier. Yes, man, the diamond still shines. He didn't leave Abu Dhabi as the undisputed lightweight champ, but chances are he will return home to Louisiana as one of the most beloved fighters in the entire sport. Nothing has ever come easy to Poirier, which is what makes his story that much more compelling when you start to realize what he's gone through to finally reach the apex where he could compete for a UFC title. And when his bout with Nurmagomedov ended, there was no bad blood or disrespect, and this is why I love Poirier. I love this guy. Instead, Poirier paid homage to his opponent while fighting back the tears of disappointment, which showed just how much all of this meant to him. Much like fellow Louisiana native Daniel Cormier, Poirier seemed more concerned about the people he let down by losing rather than passing the buck on why he didn't get the win. The reality is, Poirier shouldn't be ashamed of his performance, much less issue apologies for coming up short against Khabib. In reality, Poirier probably came closer to handing Nurmagomedov a defeat than any other opponent he's faced in the UFC, and that's just building blocks for the future. When it's all said and done, Poirier may not have a UFC title around his waist, but he's still the best that this sport has to offer. You know, this punch was powerful. I don't remember that somebody rocked Khabib so hard. He does everything the right way, from his performance inside the octagon to the way he carries himself outside the cage, not to mention he's always dedicated to helping those less fortunate than him. And Poirier, he suffered losses before, but then found a way to get back into the winning column. And don't be surprised if you year or two from now that Poirier is right back in title contention, banging on the door of another opportunity to live his dream, becoming an undisputed UFC champ. Khabib cannot last forever, we all know that. What was also good? New blood. Well, there's no doubt that UFC 242 was a top heavy card dependent on the main event between Nurmagomedov and Poirier, but the rest of the event featured a couple of potential future title contenders. Some young guns and coming talents are definitively worth watching. In the co-main event, Paul Felder earned a razor-close split decision over Edson Barboza in a rematch from another painfully close fight in 2015. It's possible to argue all day about who won the fight because it was a back-and-forth battle throughout, but Felder's victory ultimately creates a new threat to the top of the lightweight division. Felder has been making a steady climb up the rankings, but now with the signature win over Barboza on his resume, he's finally ready to challenge the fighters in the upper part of the UFC 155-pound weight class. So when Felder mentioned names like Conor McGregor, who I like to call Conor McHorse, or Justin Gaethje after his win, that's exactly the kind of fights that should be waiting for him when he books his return to action later this year in 2020. We've got also amazing Islam Makhachev, who picked up another dominant decision win over highly touted ground specialist Davi Ramos as he earned his 6th victory in a row overall. It's time for Makhachev to get a top 15 ranked opponent so he can prove if he's ready to hang with the best lightweights in the world. Otman Azaitar, whoa man, he was such a bright addition. He rocked hard Teemu Packalén and sent him to the canvas via that devastating punch. A highlight reel knockout in his debut fight. And it could be even a knockout of the year, man. While it was his third appearance inside the octagon, Muslim Salikov also proved why he was promoted as a human highlight reel when he was signed to the UFC. Makhachev, Azaitar and Salikov are also going to be great additions to the upcoming UFC cards throughout Europe as the promotion continues to expand into new markets across the world. Now let's talk about fails. Well, I think it's getting too damn hot in here. When the UFC inked the 5-year deal to go to Abu Dhabi, there was little doubt that the red carpet would be rolled out for the mixed martial arts promotion, especially with a title fight as big as the one involving lightweight champ Khabib Nurmagomedov. In fact, much like the last time the UFC visited the United Arab Emirates, an entire stadium was built for the fights that were held in Abu Dhabi. Unfortunately, the construction of the new stadium wasn't even finished when fighters began arriving for the event, with air conditioning units reportedly not installed until days before UFC 242 took place. Abu Dhabi, man, is rather warm this time of year, with temperatures peaking north of 100 degrees Fahrenheit daily, and unlike many desert regions, it was also remarkably humid, which makes the heat that much more unbearable. That's the kind of hot, swampy conditions the fighters had to endure during the Saturday, with more than a few remarking afterwards how sweltering it was to compete in those conditions. And kind of during the broadcast, listen, I was kind of shocked by this, because play-by-play commentator John Anik, however you call him, noted that the temperature on the arena floor felt like 123 degrees during the main card. Man, I know how much or how little that ultimately affected some of the performances witnessed at UFC 242. For example, Edson Barboza is from Brazil, it's normal for him. But the fact is, Davi Ramos too, it shouldn't have happened. I mean, it absolutely should not happen again. Don't kill fighters, idiots. Thankfully, none of the fighters experienced heat stroke during the event on Saturday. But it definitely wasn't of the realm of possibility that it could have happened. Just walking around in those conditions can be dangerous, much less exerting yourself physically in a fight. And the repercussions could have been disastrous. This mustn't happen ever again. If a new arena is going to be built every time the UFC comes to town, the promotion would be advised to ensure that construction is completed and the building has the proper temperature control installed before arriving on the ground, because fighters should not be required to compete under those harsh conditions, especially considering the kind of inherent danger that comes along with physical exertion in 120 plus degree heat. Somebody could have died there. These are fighters, they are humans. And now, what is the epic fail? Well, oh man, it's so dangerous business being declared the next in line for a title shot in the UFC. Yeah. On paper, every athlete scratching and clawing their way to the top of the division dreams of the day they hear the news that a title shot is awaiting for them in the near future. Unfortunately, being a #1 contender these days is almost as much a blessing as it is a curse. Colby Covington. This past week, negotiations broke down in the proposed title fight between Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington for UFC 244 in New York. Sources confirmed, as much as I have heard, that the issue essentially revolved around money and the offers that were being made to the reigning champion, a #1 contender, to compete in November. But when terms with Covington couldn't be reached, well, rather than taking a breath and sitting back down to the negotiating table, the UFC opted to just move on to the next best option, that was Jorge Masvidal, who was fresh off back-to-back knockout wins over Darren Till and Ben Askren, who I like to call Ben Foxkren. Then negotiations with Usman and his camp reportedly broke down, and there were rumors swirling that perhaps the UFC would strip his championship away and make an entirely new title fight to headline the upcoming show in Madison Square Garden, so Colby Shittington would go down, unfortunately. Now make no mistake, this is not the first time the UFC has threatened to take away a title from a defending champion for not accepting a fight on the promotion's terms. That threat has been lobbied numerous times over the years. In the end, the UFC made an entirely new fight between Masvidal and Nate Diaz, while also opting to invent a one-night championship title dubbed the, let's say, the bad motherfucker belt, that will be awarded to the winner. As it turns out, Masvidal versus Diaz was the fight that most people wanted to see anyway, but the fact that it took a champion nearly being stripped of his title and the challenger who has absolutely earned his right to fight for the belt being passed over to make it happen is beyond insane. On Saturday night, the UFC president Dana White declared that Tony Ferguson would be the next fighter in line to face Khabib Nurmagomedov for the lightweight title, while he added something, let's say something very, very stupid. I mean, Tony Ferguson is the next in line for fight if he accepts the fight. We'll see how this thing plays out when Khabib will fight and if Tony wants the fight. I mean, if he accepts the fight. I mean, fuck you, Dana. It's absolutely promotional phrasing to put the onus back on Ferguson to take whatever offer is made to face Khabib rather than an actual negotiation where the two sides would haggle over money. If the terms of a deal aren't acceptable, Ferguson and his management team may decline the offer, which means technically they turn down the fight. And thus begins the constant circle where the blame is placed on the fighters for not taking the fight despite a million other mitigating factors potentially playing a part in why a particular matchup isn't happening. There's obviously more to the story involving Usman and Covington than some ridiculous notion that one of them afraid of the other. Nobody afraid. Dana White afraid. It's all his actions. Usman just dominated arguably one of the greatest welterweight champs in the history of the sport, Tyron Woodley. And Colby Covington, well, he did the same to possibly the scariest power puncher to ever set foot in the octagon, Robbie Lawler. The reality is neither of them is scared to fight, so think about the exact scenario if something happens outside of a catastrophic injury that prevents Ferguson from taking on Nurmagomedov next. Actually, their bout is delayed on 4 occasions, so I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but chances are Ferguson isn't avoiding a fight. He's accepted 4 times previously. He might just be asking for more than the UFC is willing to give. But man, I mean, come on. Just come on, shut up, Dana.